Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube audiobook series, The Snake and the Rose. I am Abby Matthies, and I will be continuing reading on with this book. Last video, we read the prologue, so if you missed it, I would highly suggest going back and listening to it. I will link it in the description below. And without further ado, we will move on to Chapter 1, Job Transfer.
I look about me and recognize the surroundings in my house. My bed that could just barely fit my body on it, the desk with files and documents that needed to be delivered, and the side table that stood next to my bed. I lifted my hand to my forehead and noticed it was covered in sweat. But that isn't out of the ordinary. I take a few deep breaths and look at the time. 4:18 p.m. I still have a few hours before I have to go and regret my life at my hell-forsaken job. I knew I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep for a while because of that dream, so I slowly got to my feet and made my way to my desk. Now, when I say that I am living in hell, I don't mean figuratively. I mean literally. I am actually living in hell, the place where bad people or non-believers go when they pass away. The only thing was, I never really died. I never had a natural death such as dying of old age or because of some deadly disease. My cause of death was making a deal with Satan himself. Now I know that there is a saying that the devil walks among men, but I never would have thought that it would be a legit thing. Who in their right mind thinks they're actually going to make a deal with the devil himself? Clearly not me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be trapped like I am now. I got to my desk and sat, trying to figure out how to defer my mind from thinking too much. I stare at the pile of files and documents to my left. I open one of them and read its contents. Name, Jessica Robinson. Age, 32. Information. Jessica is a woman that is a yoga instructor for Get Fit Yoga Studio instructing young children. She was married young, but divorced 2 years later because of her husband denying her to have kids. She is currently searching for Mr. Right, but has been struggling to find him for 3 years now. She is looking for a man who doesn't just want her for her sexual appeal, wants to settle down and be a family man. She is desperate to find her dream man that she pleads to the stars every night to send her the perfect man. Deal to be offered. She will find her future husband within a span of a week in exchange for her sexual appeal. Decision: accepted the deal. I move along and pick up the next document underneath. Name: Manny Jacobs. Age: 41. Information: Manny is a man who suffers with alcoholism. He is married and has 2 boys and 1 girl. He works at Mike's Plumbing Galore as a plumber, but only gets paid minimum wage because of the poor work he does. He is such an alcoholic that he carries a flask with him at all times. Manny's wife finally had enough and kicked him out of the house until he gets and stays sober. He wants to become sober for his wife and kids, but struggles to stay that way. Deal to be offered. He will become sober and never have a drop of alcohol again in exchange for his wife's love. Decision: accepted the deal. What I have learned over the years of being Satan's deal maker is that when people get truly desperate, they will fall to corruption with any temptation you give them. Their mind is in a state of denial to the point where they believe they can't do anything on their own. That's where I come into play, as much as I hate to say it. I read each victim's file and make a deal with them to benefit their life. However, there is a catch. They get what they want, but something is taken away from them every time. Every deal that I make always ends the same. They get screwed over just like I was when I made my deal. They never know the full extent of the deal until it's too late. I sat the document back down on the desk. I began to stare at the pile of documents and files to my right. I know this pile consists of deals I have to make in the near future. The pile that consisted of human souls that have lost their way in life and wanted to get back on track. I never tend to look at those files until I absolutely have to. I don't want to think about how I have to fuck these people over when they are in need of help and assistance. I look away in disgust when suddenly I hear my alarm clock sounding. I walk over to shut it off. It is 6:00 a.m. I have to get ready for work. I head to my closet to find my assigned clothes I was given when I became a demon. I changed my boxers, fetched my wave-textured red shirt along with my black formal pants and shoes. I next packed up the files that needed to be delivered to Satan. I neatly stacked them one by one in my briefcase for transport reasons. I don't need random strangers in hell snooping at these documents. And who the hell knows if someone is going to try and steal from me today. I clasped my briefcase shut, and as always, I'm out the door by 61:15 a.m. to slave my life away. Demon time runs way different than human time. It runs faster and longer than 24 hours. Ironically, it runs on 66 hours and 66 minutes. As anyone can imagine, being human and switching to demon time sucks. It's extremely hard to switch your sleep schedule and your sense of time. I still have a hard time keeping up with it sometimes. 1 minute, it is 61:15, and 5 human minutes later, it is 61:45. However, I have managed to get my schedule down to a system where I know I won't be late for work. I make it a priority to be on time, seeing how I work with Satan directly every day. I already have a bad history with him. I don't need to deal with any more of his bullshit and piss him off. I arrive at his palace at 61:55 a.m. By the time I get to his office, it is exactly 62 a.m., and it's officially time to work. As usual, Satan sits in his chair reading the daily newspaper. His large hands were covering most of the new arrivals column on the front page. He sat with his large muscular body slumped on his desk while propping himself up with his arms. He wore his usual tight navy blue and black silk shirt that exposed his protruding muscles and nipples. Along with the shirt, he wore dark blue pants and black shoes to match. His monstrous, oversized black horns stuck up above the paper. As he started laughing at the local tragedies page, I could see the shimmer of copper that was detailed in his horns as he moved. He laughed for a couple seconds, enjoying the suffering of others. Within his laughing session, he spotted me in the room, and his demeanor changed drastically. He then proceeded to put down the paper and started to stare at me profoundly. Now, if there is one feature I don't like about Satan, it's his eyes. It isn't his crooked smile that he gives me when I feel defeated by him, or his rusty skin tone that glimmered in the light. It's the cat-like eyes that pierce right through you. The mixture of yellow and orange combined within his eye constantly reminds me of flames. In addition to that, I feel a burning sensation throughout my body every time he stares at me. It's almost like he purposely does it because he knows it tortures me and makes me want to quiver. But I never do. That's just what he wants. He wants to strike fear in me so that I tremble before him, but I never give him that satisfaction. He gives me an eyebrow raise after a moment. I snap myself back to reality and collect myself. He gives me his annoyed look, and I know what he wants to say. But what the fuck are you waiting for? I told myself as if it was coming out of his mouth. I immediately open my briefcase and hand him the files. He grabs them from my hand and starts to read. He examines each of them closely to see what temptations people fell to. He does this normal pattern of glaring back and forth between the file and me while I wait for him to scold at me. However, he wasn't saying anything. He just kept looking at the file and looking back at me. I took a quick glance at the clock on his bookshelf. It read 63:66 a.m., and I finally got fed up with his glaring charade. Is something wrong? I abruptly said aloud. Huh? Satan muttered. I asked if something was wrong. Every day, when I give you files of accepted deals, you criticize me on how I did and how I am not doing my job right. How come today you just keep looking at me like I'm— Did I tell you that you could fucking speak to me? You don't speak unless I tell you to. He snarled with his low, raspy voice. I knew that he didn't like people speaking freely, but I did it anyway. He always wanted to control every living thing down in hell, and that's the way he liked it. As for me, I always despised it. He was exactly like an arrogant dictator. Never listens to anyone and gets whatever he asks for because of the fear he fills people with. Instead of getting into an argument with him like I normally do, I shut my mouth and stared back at him with aggression. He laid down the file he was reading, turned himself around, and walked to the window. From Satan's office, you could view the entire kingdom of hell, from the fiery pits that held burning souls to the inner city life of businesses and shops. Destruction and terror filled the area. From his window, he could see all the chaos and suffering that he was causing, and yet he took pride in every bit of it. He looked upon his creation for about a minute. Then, as quick as a flash, he closed the curtain with his hands and used his power to shut the rest of them. The only light that could be seen now was the artificial light from the torches that were lit along the walls of the room. He walked back to his desk and stood behind it. His face expressed agitation, but I don't think it was all from me. He was rubbing his chin and face, trying to hide his frustration. I could tell something was on his mind, but it was only a matter of if he was going to tell me or not. He gathered himself as best he could, cleared his throat, and turned his head to me. Shut the door, seeing how you're standing there like an idiot. I did as I was told, and closed the door. My mind started to race with the thoughts of what might be going on. Satan never closes the curtains or the door unless he talks about private matters. It ensured that no one can see or hear what was being talked within this specific room. The curtains were black and opaque so no one could see through them when they were closed. In addition, the room became soundproof when the door was shut. So for him to act the way that he is now, it made the alarm in my head sound. I turned back around and he gestured to the spot in front of him. I did as he instructed and walked to the spot. We now stood almost face to face with each other. The only thing that was separating us was his desk. He took his arm and propped himself up on his desk again as he leaned on it. He started to stare at me as I stood with perfect posture. I followed his eye movements as he was looking me up and down. I could feel that burning sensation as he examined me from head to toe. I wanted to intrude on his body-gazing episode and tell him off, but I forced myself to hold my tongue and let him continue. His eyes finally met mine after he was done. He straightened himself and started to speak. You know, you are one of the greatest deals I ever made. You truly are. Anger started to boil inside of me as my stomach became agitated by repulsion. My brain started to flash back to that unfathomable day. The day I was taken away from my wife and son. To that one regret that brings back all of the pain and strife I felt ever since. And I knew he took pleasure in knowing that. I stood there speechless and disgusted at the sentence that came out of his mouth. But I kept a stern face as he continued to speak. I really enjoyed torturing you with my bidding duties. It seemed like the perfect job for you to do, knowing that you were a caring doctor that wanted to heal and help others. If you call this healing and helping others, you're out of your fucking mind, I growled. He gave me an evil glare, and I knew I irritated him again. I was glad to know that I aggravated him just as much as he aggravated me. But the kind of glare his face displayed warned me to stay in check with myself before I worsened my punishment. Sorry, sir. Out of line. I spoke softly. He shook it off and continued talking again. Fortunately for you, you were chosen for a job transfer. This means that you can no longer be my deal maker and do my bidding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was free from being his dealer. I didn't have to lie to people anymore and be the cause of their consequences. No more documents and files, no more tormenting of innocent people. This was the greatest news I heard in 13 years. But yet I wasn't jumping for joy. He said I was selected for a job transfer. If he wanted me to do his bidding so badly, why did he select me? But the more important question, if I wasn't bidding for him anymore, what was I doing? So just what exactly am I transferring to? I thought I was made to make deals, I asked curiously, containing my excitement. Not anymore. You are officially a protector demon. Okay, but what the hell is that exactly? A protector demon is a demon that is randomly selected to protect a child on Earth. Wait, so you're telling me that I am still going to work on Earth? The only thing that is changing is that I am protecting a child instead of tricking people into deals? I asked, trying to contain my joy. If that was the case, this was perfect for me. I could still live in the human world and protect my son. I could rekindle with my family again. This day was truly going to turn my whole life around. Sure. We'll go with that. That's good enough for me. Let's go. I want to see my son, I exclaimed to him, losing control of my emotions. I never said you were going to protect your child. What do you mean I am not protecting my son? You said I get to protect a child on Earth. I choose my son. I never said you had the choice of choosing which child you protect. This isn't something you or I can decide. This part of hell is out of my control. What the hell is that supposed to mean? You have control over everything in this shithole. You're a fucking liar. You have been since day one. You're the one who tricked me and took me away from my family. I should have the right to choose. I would much rather lie to you than tell you the truth. But this is the harsh reality of the situation. I am not in charge of this, and neither of us have a choice in the matter. End of discussion. My anger had boiled over and was spilling onto the floor. I couldn't believe this shit. First, Satan tells me the greatest news of my demon life, and then crushes it within an instant. This is fucking ridiculous, and I was not about to have any of it. No, this isn't the end of the discussion. You have been a dick to me all these years and have never explained a damn thing to me. But all of a sudden now you're throwing me into a job that I have never heard of before? What the fuck? What are the dangers that a protector demon faces? What are the pros and cons of being one? What are the qualifications? What do I need to know in order to... And within that very moment, Satan snapped his fingers. I felt a rush of wind rush upward, and then I was gone. I dropped out of thin air onto the ground, and all I knew was that I was standing in a room with a random kid sitting at her computer. I shuffled on my feet as I hit the ground. Satan was never kind enough to gradually teleport me up to the human world. The first couple of times he did, I always became disoriented from the brute force and speed that he used. After a while, I got used to the feeling of being tossed around belligerently. At this moment, though, I wasn't disoriented by the sudden teleportation. It was because of the mystifying change in my surroundings. I stood towards the back wall of the room where the child sat towards the front, inattentive to me being in the room. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was standing in a random room with a kid I knew nothing about. My knees felt weak to the point where I slowly started to sink to the floor. I started to shift my legs when all of a sudden the child looked at me. I stood there breathless. If I had a beating heart, it would have been pounding violently, almost to the point where it would have popped out of my chest. I stayed frozen in place, waiting for her to start freaking out or something. After a couple of seconds, she turned her head away and went back to working on her computer. I inhaled a large breath of air. I don't think she was able to see me somehow. I don't know why she wouldn't be able to, but I go along with it and cautiously moved forward to get a better look at my surroundings. I was standing in what appeared to be a small bedroom with textured white walls. The first wall that stood in front of me had artwork taped on it. Each art piece had used different medias such as charcoal, colored pencil, and pastels. The artwork was organized and placed scrupulously to surround what looked to be a pair of closet doors. As I moved my eyes along to the right of the wall, I noticed she had some sort of poster hung up. It had 3 animatronic robots on it. One was designed as a bear, another was a chicken, and the last was a rabbit. I read the title that was designed into it, Five Nights at Freddy's. I examined the poster, trying to understand why anyone would have wanted a poster like this in their room. Maybe it was some sort of artwork she made in a 3D modeling program? I don't know. I was clueless to what it was, so I continued turning my eyes clockwise to view the rest of the room. The next wall had nothing on it but a window. The curtains were open wide, so I was able to view the living environment that I was suddenly put into. As I gazed through it, I saw nothing but farming fields and trees neighboring the house. 2 large maple trees stood on each side of the medium-sized front yard. Along the side of the house stood a white garage. Finally, cutting through the middle of it all, was a driveway that led from the house to the road. Fitting all of the pieces together, I knew I was in the countryside of some sort. I just don't know exactly where. It was a nice sight to take in, though. Don't get me wrong. This was a way better view than the sight of flames and screaming demons. It was something I wasn't used to, but I was going to enjoy every bit of it. I proceeded to the back wall, where I was standing. I turned my body to find a black backdrop set up right behind me. It was about as tall as the ceiling, which was probably 8 feet tall. The reason I could have guessed that was because I was 7 feet tall. If you include my horns, I am 7 foot 3 inches. I was one of the tallest demons in hell. Matter of fact, I remembered I was just as tall as Satan, and he is the tallest. I never understood why I was so tall. I guess that was just the way I was made. I continued to walk to the right of the backdrop. Appearing behind it, the wall had decorations and pictures placed upon it, none of which that stuck out to me. I did see 2 purple letters on the wall that hung next to each other. They looked like they were supposed to hang above a bed. The 2 letters were A and D. I thought that maybe they symbolized her initials. Why else would there be 2 random letters hung on a wall like that? I brushed the thought away and pressed on with my examination of the room. Turning to the last wall, I saw stained glass panel art that was displayed on hanging nails and a closed door leading to the rest of the house. The door had a long mirror hanging from it, along with a golden doorknob. Otherwise, the wall was mostly plain. The view was obstructed by a cage that sat on top of a dresser. I could see little creatures moving within it, so I bent down to take a closer look at them. At eye level, I could see that the creatures were 3 guinea pigs roaming around and playing with each other. They had white bedding scattered throughout the cage along with strands of hay. One guinea pig was mostly black with a white face. Another was black and white like a cow, and the last almost looked like a squirrel with no tail. I straightened myself back up and continued with my original task. The floor was covered in a variety of clothes and accessories. I haven't seen a room this messy since I was human. Since I lived at home with my son. It almost looked like she just threw all her clothes into the air and left them lay on the ground. Taking in that sight flashed a memory in my head. I remembered how I used to walk into my son's room and see the scattered toys and clothes along the floor. I could still visualize him sitting on his bed playing with his Tickle Me Elmo, moving his hands, wiggling his little fingers on Elmo's tummy. I could still hear his little laugh that he had made every time Elmo spoke. He would giggle until he noticed me watching him from the doorway. As soon as he realized I was there, he would take action and leap off his bed to give me a hug. I would always swoop down to his level, collect him in my arms, and embrace him as best I could. As I remember him saying I love you to me, the memory faded, and I was brought back to my harsh reality. After the flashback, I finally started to realize that there was no actual bed within the room. There were LED light strips and LED light stands within the corner of the room. There was a large black bin adjacent to it with another small guinea pig cage sitting on top. I could see from where I stood that there was only one pet living in it, a black furred guinea pig with a tan stripe along its shoulder blades. As I stood there confused, I could only assume that the room that I was standing in was some sort of spare bedroom that she used for whatever she wanted. I predicted that because of the lights and backdrop that she did photography of some sort. That would explain the pictures hanging up on the wall behind the backdrop. I turned back to the girl as she continued working on her computer. Now, when Satan said that I would be protecting a child, I was thinking between the ages of 5 and 13. The human that I was looking at now seemed to be in her high school years, between the ages of 16 and 18. She had her hair tied up in a bun, which was a ruby red, while the base of her hair was black. She wore a graphic t-shirt that had a picture and text involving Bob Ross, which didn't surprise me from the looks of her room. Along with the shirt, she wore blue bootcut jeans that were form-fitting to her thighs and was barefoot. Judging from the way she looked, she wasn't some sort of horror slut. She didn't look like the type of girl who would hook up with every guy that she could or show off her body parts for sexual attention. However, I know better than anyone that looks can be deceiving. As she gazed at her computer, I was able to see her deep brown eyes filled with life and hope. She was typing something and staring at her computer intently. I began to wonder what she was typing on her screen, so I made my way behind her to get a better look. Upon my discovery, I could see that she was working on some sort of Word document. It had a title written in bold lettering that was aligned to the middle of the page. It read, Design Document for Duality. My only assumption I made about it was that it was for school. It must be for some elective that she signed up for to fill her schedule. I gazed further at the document and noticed that she had typed in the header box of the document. It displayed her name in size 12 font, Abby Davis. I took a second look at the name and looked back at the girl. She guided her hand to grab her phone that was to the right of her. She lifted it up, and the lock screen appeared instantly. I looked at the phone and caught the time, 12:30 p.m. I recalled that I was suddenly now running on human time, if this was supposed to be my job. She set her phone back down, and a grin appeared across her face, as if she felt accomplished. After seeing her reaction, I decided to take a step back, up against the back wall, to reflect on what I learned. I finally let my thoughts start to roam free in my head. I felt a little more relief knowing that I obtained her name. It felt like I had a foot through a door that I wasn't allowed to enter yet. It made me feel like I wasn't totally lost in the dark. I know that she can't see me for the time being. In fact, I don't know if she ever will be able to, and I was okay with that. I couldn't imagine having her find out that a demon was stuck with her for the rest of her life. I take it that she wouldn't handle the news very well, especially if she was religious. In addition to that, I would want to make sure I knew what I was doing as a protector demon before she found out about me. I felt my stomach start to tie in knots at the thoughts running through my head now, so I shook them away and collected myself again. I turned my attention back to Abby. She was starting to stand up and stretch her body. I assumed that she had been sitting down for a long time before I came along, so a good stretch was well deserved. After she was done, she started to open her phone and interact with it. I began to examine the height of her compared to me. I knew that I was taller than her, but I didn't know by how much. Getting the full view of her now, she was about 5'7" Even though I was making an estimation on her height, I at least knew that there wasn't a huge height difference if she had to look up at me. She took a step forward, like she was going to walk towards me, but stopped. With that one step she took, I could confirm that she came up at least chest level to me. The bare idea of that relieved some of my worries. I wouldn't want her to feel intimidated by me if she ever could really see me. With that being said, I relaxed a little bit and cleared my head again. Suddenly, a door knock filled the silenced room.
Abby, sweetheart, can I come in?
A voice called from outside the door.
Of course you can, Mom.
She replied back. Her mom opened the door and entered the room. I panicked for a moment, still thinking that they were able to see me, but I reassured myself that they can't. Looking upon Abby's mother, she was a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s. She had short brown hair and eyes. She was wearing casual clothing and appeared a little shorter than Abby, but not by much. As she entered, she started talking again.
Hello, my love. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I am pretty good myself. Just got back from town. I picked up some new curtains for the kitchen windows and a new faucet to replace the old one. Now I just need to get your father to install it for me.
With that sentence, they both started laughing simultaneously. I observed the connection that Abby had with her mother, and I could tell she was a mama's girl.
Anyways, did you get your schoolwork done for the day?
Abby's mother asked after their laughing episode.
I actually just finished it a minute or two ago. Now it is just relaxing and hanging out until I have to leave for my friend meetup.
Okay, sounds good. One final thing. Just a reminder that we are having lunch at your grandparents' house after church on Sunday.
Son of a bitch! This is what I was practically afraid of. She's religious. If she ever finds out about me, she's really gonna flip out. She's just gonna assume that I'm here to take her soul or torture her. Now I really hope she will never be able to see me,
Sounds good, Mom. I love you.
Abby said sweetly.
I love you too.
Abby's mom walked up to her, gave her a hug and kiss on the cheek, and left the room. After that interaction, she took a deep breath and started to walk towards her backdrop. She was starting to wipe off all the loose hair and debris that accumulated on it. I stood next to her with the expression of confusion on my face. Why was it so important to brush off the backdrop? Another great question. What was she up to? She started walking towards her light stands and picked them up. She moved each light to one part of the room and angled them towards the backdrop. While watching her meticulously set up the lights, I recognized that she was setting up the room for her photography. Well, at least that was the only explanation I had. I wouldn't know what else the setup was for. She then took a red and blue light filter and put one in each light. The colors mixed as they shined brightly within the room. I could see the glimmer of light reflecting off my shirt. I lifted my hand and was amazed by how my hand was covered in red, but the shadows were blue. The way she angled the lights created this cool shadow effect depending on where you stood in the room. I brought my hand down and turned to Abby as she was throwing her clothes to the side of the room, clearing the main area. She then turned and walked to the desk and pulled out a makeup bag, a wig, and a pair of circle glasses. I looked at the items that she pulled out and I stood there puzzled. I kept trying to figure out what exactly she was going to do with the accessories she had acquired. The makeup bag made sense. Most girls this age wear makeup to look pretty and hide their true face instead of letting others see how they really look. However, the wig and the circle glasses threw me through a loop. I was completely lost on why she would need to use these objects. Abby then grabbed her phone and placed it within her phone stand that she had in the middle of the room. She started playing music off of her playlist and made her way back to her desk. As she approached it, she began to speak.
All right, let's get to work, Abby.
And she began to open her makeup bag and got to work.
This has been Chapter 1, Job Transfer, from the book The Snake and the Rose. I'm Abby Matthies, and I thank you for listening. Tune into the next video for Chapter 2.